Princess Sci-Fi stood on the high balcony of the Dominion's war station, her violet eyes scanning the battlefield below. She was tall and graceful, her silver hair flowing behind her like liquid light. Her people, the Varnari, were known for their intelligence and telepathic abilities. They ruled many worlds, and their empire had stood for thousands of years. But now, for the first time, Sci-Fi felt uncertain. The XL-Far swarm had attacked suddenly, their monstrous insect-like warriors sweeping across Dominion territory like a plague. No species had ever stood against them for long. Even the Varnari, with their powerful weapons and superior minds, were struggling. Sci-Fi's fleet had arrived to reinforce the front lines, expecting a quick and decisive victory. Instead, the battle was turning into chaos. She gripped the rail tightly as massive explosions shook the ground. The XL-Far were pushing forward, overwhelming the Dominion's warriors with sheer numbers. The air was filled with the sound of energy blasts, alien roars, and the desperate cries of soldiers. Then something unexpected happened. From the distant horizon, new ships descended, sleek, dark, and unfamiliar. At first, Sci-Fi thought they were more enemies. But as they touched the ground, metal ramps lowered, and strange warriors emerged. They were human. Sci-Fi had heard of humanity before, but her people considered them insignificant, a young, primitive race from a distant world. They had no telepathic abilities, no great empire, no legendary fleets. Why were they here? She watched closely as the human soldiers took position. They moved with precision and confidence, their armor dark and battle-worn. Their leader, Captain Darius Voss, stepped forward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with short black hair and sharp gray eyes. His face was scared, but his expression was calm. Sci-Fi expected them to hesitate, to be afraid. But instead, they charged. The humans attacked with a level of aggression she had never seen before. They moved fast, dodging enemy fire with skill. They didn't rely on long-distance energy weapons like the Varnari. Instead, they fought up close, using powerful projectile rifles, grenades, and brutal hand-to-hand combat. One human soldier, Lieutenant Rain Calder, led a group straight into the XL-Far front lines. She was smaller than the others, but moved like a storm, her blonde hair tied back under her helmet. She rolled under the claws of a massive insectoid beast and fired a shotgun blast straight into its mouth. The creature collapsed, twitching. Another soldier, Sergeant Malik Oren, carried a massive weapon that spit fire and metal. He laughed as he mowed down wave after wave of enemies. "Come on, you ugly freaks. We're just getting started," he roared. Sci-Fi was stunned. These humans should have been crushed instantly. They should have fled in terror, but instead, they thrived in battle. Even as the XL-Far adapted, trying to outmaneuver them, the humans adjusted. They changed tactics instantly, working together in a way that was both chaotic and perfect. They didn't fight like the Dominion, who relied on strategy and logic. The humans fought with instinct, emotion, and sheer willpower. Minutes passed, then hours, and then something impossible happened. The tide of battle shifted. For the first time since the war began, the XL-Far were falling back. The humans, these so-called primitive beings, were winning. Princess Sci-Fi's heart pounded in her chest. She turned to her generals, who looked just as shocked as she felt. What kind of warriors are these?" she whispered. No one had an answer. But one thing was clear. The humans were not to be underestimated. The battlefield was no longer the same. Thick smoke covered the ground, and the air smelled of fire and metal. The XL-Far, once an unstoppable force, were now on the defensive. Their towering insect-like warriors screeched in frustration as human bullets tore through their thick carapaces. The Dominion soldiers, who had fought with cold strategy before, now watched in awe as their unexpected allies pushed forward with a ferocity unlike anything they had ever seen. Princess Sci-Fi stood at the command station, her violet eyes locked onto the battle unfolding below. She had never been this surprised in her life. How were these humans fighting so effectively? Captain Darius Voss moved like a commander who had fought 1,000 battles. His gray eyes scanned the battlefield, catching weaknesses that even her most skilled tacticians had missed. His voice cut through the noise as he barked orders into his communicator. Alpha Squad, flank left. Drive them toward the artillery fire. Bravo, hold the center. Delta, with me. We push forward now. His soldiers obeyed instantly, moving like a well-oiled machine. Saphira's people, the Varnari, relied on coordination through telepathic links. Their battlefield formations were precise but predictable. Humans, on the other hand, were unpredictable. They adapted faster than any species she had ever seen. If one plan failed, they made a new one within seconds. She turned to her highest-ranking officer, Commander Veclan, a tall, silver-haired Varnari with a deep frown on his face. "They fight without fear," Sci-Fi said. Veclan shook his head. "No, Princess. They fight despite fear." She considered his words carefully as she observed the battlefield. On the ground, Lieutenant Rain Calder dashed between burning wreckage, reloading her rifle with practiced speed. A massive XL-FAR warrior lunged at her, its bladed limbs gleaming under the firelit sky. Without hesitation, she ducked low, rolled to the side, and fired 3 precise shots into its eye sockets. The creature let out a final shriek before collapsing at her feet. Rain smirked, not so scary up close. Nearby, Sergeant Malik Oren carried a massive rotary gun, its barrels glowing red from continuous fire. He stood his ground as enemy forces rushed toward him, his deep voice booming across the battlefield. "Come on, Bugs. You want to fight? I've got plenty for you." With a deafening roar, his weapon spun to life, unleashing a storm of bullets that shredded through the enemy ranks. Even as acid from a dying Selfar splashed onto his armor, he didn't falter. Pain meant nothing. Victory was everything. Saphira clenched her fists. She had seen great warriors before, but never like this. Humans didn't just fight with strength. They fought with heart. They fought for each other, never leaving a fallen comrade behind. A loud explosion suddenly rocked the ground. A XL-FAR heavy tank, a massive 6-legged war beast covered in thick armor, emerged from the smoke, its massive plasma cannons glowing. It fired, sending a blue energy blast toward the human front lines. Captain Voss didn't hesitate. "Anti-tank team, take it down." A trio of human soldiers sprinted forward, weaving between debris. One of them, a demolitions expert named Cordon Jex, slid under a pile of rubble and pulled a heavy explosive from his pack. "Cover me," he shouted. Bullets and energy blasts flew around him as his squadmates laid down suppressing fire. Jex rushed toward the war beast, dodging its massive limbs. At the last second, he jumped onto its back, planted the explosive at a weak joint, and leaped away just as it detonated. The explosion tore through the creature's armor, sending it crashing to the ground in a lifeless heap. A wave of silence passed over the battlefield. And then, cheers. The human soldiers roared in triumph, their spirits unbroken. Saphira exhaled, finally realizing something. These warriors were not just strong. They were something else entirely. They refused to surrender. They refused to break. And as long as they stood, the XL-FAR would never win. The battlefield had changed. Hours ago, the XL-FAR swarm had seemed unstoppable, their monstrous insect-like warriors devouring everything in their path. But now, the tide had turned. The humans, unexpected, underestimated, had done what no one else could. They had stopped the swarm's advance. Princess Saphira stood at the command post, her violet eyes locked onto the holographic battle map. The XL-FAR's forces were scattered, their once perfect advance now broken into disorganized retreat. And the humans, they weren't stopping. They pushed forward, capitalizing on every weakness. She turned to Captain Darius Voss. The human leader stood tall, his dark gray armor scratched and dented from battle. His face was streaked with dirt, his short black hair damp with sweat, but his eyes burned with focus. "You're pushing them too hard," Sci-Fi said. "If you overextend, your forces will be vulnerable." Voss smirked. "That's what they'll think, but that's what we want." Before she could question him, he turned back to his communicator. "Alpha Team, fall back. Make it look like you're retreating. Bravo, hold your ground. Delta, get ready to move." Sci-Fi narrowed her eyes. Humans fought so differently from the Varnari. Her people relied on carefully planned strategies, logical and precise. Humans, on the other hand, fought with deception, unpredictability, and audacity. On the ground, Lieutenant Rain Calder was leading Alpha Team in their retreat. She ran swiftly, her blonde ponytail bouncing behind her as she ducked behind cover. "Make it messy," she called to her squad. "We need them to think we're scared." Her soldiers fired blindly over their shoulders, shouting and cursing as they fell back. The XL-FAR took the bait. The massive insectoids screeched in triumph and charged after them, thinking they had won. They were wrong. As soon as the enemy swarmed into the open field, Delta Team, hidden within the ruins of a collapsed fortress, sprang their trap. Heavy gunfire and explosives rained down, cutting the XL-FAR apart before they even knew what was happening. Sergeant Malik Oren led the ambush, his massive rotary gun spinning with deadly precision. He grinned as bullets tore through the enemy ranks. "Surprise, you ugly freaks," he bellowed. Grenades exploded, sniper shots cracked through the air. And in mere minutes, the XL-FAR attack had turned into a massacre. Sci-Fi watched in stunned silence. "You tricked them," she said, almost to herself. Voss folded his arms. "War isn't just about strength. It's about knowing how your enemy thinks, and making them believe exactly what you want them to." The princess had never seen war like this before. Varnari battles were fought with calculation, precision, and careful execution. But humans, they fought with instinct, risk, and sheer nerve, and somehow, it worked. A sudden alert flashed on the battle map. A new force was approaching. A XL-FAR behemoth unit. A single creature, but the size of a fortress. Its thick armor plates gleamed under the alien sun, and its massive legs crushed the ground as it moved forward. Even the Dominion's most advanced plasma cannons had struggled to break through such creatures before. But the humans didn't hesitate. "We take it down now," Voss ordered. Sci-Fi frowned. "We should regroup. That thing is too powerful." "It bleeds," Voss said simply. "If it bleeds, we can kill it." The word sent a chill down her spine. On the battlefield, demolition expert Corbin Jex was already moving. He sprinted between rubble, dodging falling debris as the behemoth roared. "I need cover." "I've got the payload," Jex shouted. Rain and her team provided fire support, targeting the behemoth's legs and joints to slow it down. Explosions erupted across its armored hide, but it kept moving. Jex climbed onto the ruins of a fallen tower and leaped onto the behemoth's back, strapping high-powered explosives onto its spine. He had seconds before it realized he was there. He hit the detonator and jumped. The explosion ripped through the monster's armor, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. The behemoth let out a final, deafening shriek before collapsing in a cloud of dust and fire. A wave of silence followed. And then, the cheers of human soldiers filled the air. Sci-Fi let out a slow breath. She turned to Voss. "You humans, you fight like no one I have ever seen." Voss smirked. "Yeah, we get that a lot." The princess knew, at that moment, something had changed. Humanity was more than just another species. They were warriors unlike any the galaxy had ever known. And for the first time in her life, Sci-Fi wasn't sure whether that was a good thing or a terrifying one. The battlefield lay in ruins. Smoke curled into the sky, and the scent of burnt metal and alien blood hung heavy in the air. The XL-FAR were retreating, their once mighty invasion force now scattered and broken. For the first time in Dominion history, they had been stopped, not by advanced technology, not by telepathic precision, but by sheer human willpower. Princess Sci-Fi stood in silence, watching the human soldiers as they regrouped. Despite the exhaustion in their faces, they still moved with purpose. They should have been tired. They should have needed rest. But instead, they were already preparing for the next fight. Captain Darius Voss wiped the sweat from his brow, his sharp gray eyes scanning the battlefield. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply looked for the next problem to solve. Sci-Fi couldn't understand it. "Your soldiers, they should be collapsing by now," she said, stepping beside him. "They fought longer and harder than anyone here. How do they keep going?" Voss didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on his men. "Because we don't stop until the job is done." A sudden noise crackled over the human comms, an urgent message from the front. "Captain, we've detected a new wave incoming. Zelvar warships, 5 of them. They're preparing to land reinforcements." Sci-Fi's stomach twisted. 5 warships. That meant thousands of fresh Zelvar warriors. Voss didn't flinch. "Then we take them out before they land," he said. Sci-Fi stared at him. "That's suicide. Your forces are already stretched thin." "So are theirs," Voss countered. "They don't expect us to attack first." He turned to his second-in-command. "Lieutenant Calder, prep the strike teams. We hit them before they get comfortable." Rain Calder nodded sharply. "Understood, sir." She turned to her team. "Lock and load. We're taking the fight to them." Within minutes, the humans had mobilized. They weren't just defending anymore. They were launching an assault. Sci-Fi had seen countless battles, but never one like this. Her people would have fallen back, regrouped, planned for the next encounter. Humans. They didn't wait. They acted. She hesitated for only a moment before making her decision. "Prepare my elite guards," she ordered Commander Vechlin. "We fight alongside them." The Varnari soldiers exchanged glances, shocked. Their princess, a royal strategist, a ruler, was choosing to fight on the ground with these unpredictable warriors. But Sci-Fi wasn't just a princess. She was a leader, and for the first time in her life, she wanted to see what it was like to fight as humans did. As the strike teams moved out, Sci-Fi joined them, her sleek, black armor shimmering in the dim light. Voss raised an eyebrow. "Didn't take you for a frontline fighter." Sci-Fi met his gaze. "You humans aren't the only ones full of surprises." The assault begins. The warships loomed overhead, their landing gears extending, preparing to drop another wave of Zelvar troops onto the surface. But the humans had no intention of letting that happen. A single word rang through the comms. "Attack." Explosions lit up the sky as human rocket teams fired at the landing base. The warships shuddered from the impact, their shields flickering under the relentless assault. On the ground, Lieutenant Rain Calder led her squad forward, dodging between cover as Zelvar warriors poured from the ships. "Push them back. Keep them from forming a line," she shouted. Sergeant Malik Oren unleashed suppressing fire, his heavy rotary gun tearing through the enemy ranks. Princess Sci-Fi moved with deadly grace, her twin energy blades flashing as she cut through the insectoid warriors. Her people had always fought with precision, but today she fought with something else: determination. The battle raged on, but the humans never wavered. They didn't fight for glory. They didn't fight for territory. They fought because they refused to lose. And against such an enemy, even the Zelvar had no chance. As the final warship exploded in a ball of fire, Sci-Fi turned to Voss, breathing heavily. "Now I understand," she said. Voss glanced at her. "Understand what?" She looked back at the battlefield, at the humans standing tall despite their wounds, despite the odds. "Why your kind always wins." The humans weren't the strongest. They weren't the fastest. But they were something far more dangerous. They were unstoppable. The battlefield was finally silent. The last Zelfar warship had been reduced to smoldering wreckage, and the enemy's reinforcements lay in ruins. The night sky was filled with the glow of distant fires, and the only sounds that remained were the footsteps of survivors and the quiet voices of soldiers tending to the wounded. Princess Sci-Fi stood among them, her sleek black armor now scarred from battle. She looked at the human soldiers, amazed that they still stood despite everything they had endured. Captain Darius Voss walked beside her, his gray eyes scanning the aftermath. His expression was unreadable, but Sci-Fi could sense it, the weight of command pressing heavily on his shoulders. "You won," she said. Voss exhaled slowly. "We survived. That's not the same thing." His words made her pause. Her people, the Varnari, measured victory by strategy, by territory gained, by numbers. Humans, they measured it by who made it out alive. Nearby, Lieutenant Rain Calder knelt beside a wounded soldier, pressing a cloth against his bleeding shoulder. Sergeant Malik Oren sat against a broken wall, breathing heavily, his massive weapon resting across his legs. Demolitions expert Cordon Jex, his face smeared with soot, was helping to move the injured. They had fought like demons. They had stood against impossible odds. But now, Sci-Fi saw something she had never noticed before. They weren't invincible. They were just willing to fight through the pain. A human medic passed by, checking on the wounded. "We need more medical supplies. Some of these guys won't last the night." Sci-Fi turned to her second-in-command, Commander Veclan. "Send what we have to their medics. Prioritize the worst cases." Veclan hesitated. "Princess, our own soldiers need treatment." "And so do they," she said firmly. "We fought this battle together. We will not let them bleed alone." Veclan gave a slow nod before walking away to carry out her orders. A moment of truth. Sci-Fi watched as the humans worked tirelessly, refusing to rest. They carried their wounded, reinforced their defenses, and prepared for another fight, even though none had come yet. She turned back to Voss. "You knew the XL-FAR would send reinforcements. You knew you didn't have the numbers. So why did you attack first?" Voss shrugged. "Because waiting means giving the enemy control. We don't wait for a fight. We end it before it starts." Sci-Fi folded her arms. "And what happens when the next fight comes? When more XL-FAR arrive? You cannot keep this up forever." Voss finally looked at her. "No, but we'll fight anyway." The sheer certainty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. She had always thought that strategy and strength determined the outcome of a war. But humans had something far more dangerous than either. They had the will to keep going, no matter the cost. And that frightened her. Because if humanity could do this as an ally, what would they be capable of as an enemy? The air was thick with the scent of burning wreckage and plasma fire. The battle was over, but no one celebrated. The human soldiers worked tirelessly, tending to the wounded, repairing their damaged equipment, and reinforcing their makeshift defenses. They weren't resting. They were preparing. Princess Sci-Fi had seen many wars, but never had she witnessed a force like this. Humans did not fight for conquest or glory. They fought because they refused to lose. She stood near the command post, watching as Captain Darius Voss coordinated his troops. His gray eyes were sharp as ever, but there was an exhaustion behind them, buried beneath his iron will. "Status?" he asked Lieutenant Rain Calder. She wiped sweat from her dirt-streaked face and nodded. "Casualties were heavy, but we held. Our supplies are running low, though. If another wave comes, we might not have enough ammo to stop them." Voss nodded grimly. "Then we make sure there isn't another wave." An unexpected warning. Before Sci-Fi could ask what he meant, a distorted voice crackled over the comms. "This is Second Layer Commander Koresh of the XL-FAR Swarm. Humans, Varnari, you fight well, but your efforts are meaningless. You cannot win." Sci-Fi stiffened. A XL-FAR commander was speaking to them directly. That was unheard of. Voss smirked. You sound nervous, Koresh. Usually, the ones winning don't bother sending threats. A wet, guttural laugh came from the other end of the transmission. You think this was our full strength? No, this was a test. The word sent a chill through Sci-Fi's veins. You mean, she started. Your victory means nothing. Koresh hissed. A true force is coming. The Hive Lords have taken notice of your kind. They will arrive soon. And when they do, there will be nothing left of your armies but dust and bones. The transmission cut out. Silence followed. For the first time since she had met him, Sci-Fi saw something in Voss's expression she hadn't expected. A flicker of concern. No time to waste. We need to move, he said immediately. Calder, get the scouts out there. We need eyes in the sky. Orin, prepare for evac routes in case we need to fall back. Sci-Fi frowned. You believe him? Voss turned to her. The XL-FAR don't bluff. If they say more are coming, then we have to assume they're coming. The princess hesitated. She had spent years studying war, learning from the greatest military minds of the Varnari Dominion. But humans, they didn't just fight wars. They adapted to them in ways no other species could. And right now, she realized, she had no better option than to trust them. Then we fight together, she said at last. Voss nodded. Good, because if we don't, we die together too. Far above them, in the cold darkness of space, the real XL-FAR fleet was already moving. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, mirroring the tension on the ground. The human forces and Varnari warriors worked side by side, fortifying their position. The battlefield had turned into a war camp. Trenches dug deep, heavy weapons set in place, and watchtowers scanning the skies for the incoming enemy. Princess Sci-Fi stood on a rocky outcrop, gazing at the distant horizon. She could feel it. A storm of destruction was coming. Captain Darius Voss approached, his heavy boots crunching against the dirt. His uniform was stained with battle, but his gray eyes burned with determination. Scouts confirmed it, he said. The XL-FAR fleet is inbound. They'll be here in less than 6 hours. Sci-Fi clenched her fists. How many? Voss exhaled slowly. Too many. The final stand. Lieutenant Rain Calder and Sergeant Malik Orin joined them at the command post, a holographic map flickering in the air before them. We've counted at least 20 warships, Calder reported. And that's just the ones we can see. If they drop their full forces, we'll be facing an army in the millions. Sci-Fi felt her throat tighten. No army, no matter how strong, could survive those odds. Then we evacuate, she said. Gather what we can and retreat before they arrive. Voss shook his head. That's not an option. If we run, they'll chase us. And if they chase us, they'll destroy every colony, every outpost, until there's nothing left. Sci-Fi hated to admit it, but he was right. The XL-FAR were a swarm. If they sensed weakness, they would never stop. So what's the plan? She asked. Voss tapped a section of the holographic map. We don't have the numbers to win a full-scale war, but we do have something the XL-FAR don't. Orin grinned. Brains. And explosives, Calder added. Voss smirked. Exactly. We lure them in, hit them hard, and take out their command structure. The XL-FAR are powerful, but without their leaders, they're just mindless drones. Sci-Fi's eyes widened. You want to assassinate their hive lords. We don't have to kill them all, Voss explained. Just enough to make them panic. Cut off the head, and the body dies. It was a bold strategy, one her own people would never dare attempt. The Varnari fought with precision, careful planning, and overwhelming force. But humans thrived in chaos, and Sci-Fi was beginning to understand why they won battles no one else could. The calm before the storm. The next few hours passed in a blur. Engineers rigged explosives, snipers took their positions, and soldiers steeled themselves for what was to come. Sci-Fi, for the first time in her life, stood among the warriors instead of above them. She gripped her twin energy blades, her black armor polished and ready. Voss stopped beside her. "You sure about this?" She gave him a sharp look. "Are you?" He grinned. "Not even a little." She smirked. As the first enemy warships broke through the atmosphere, the ground trembled beneath them. Sci-Fi took a deep breath. This was it, the battle that would decide everything. "All units, prepare for engagement." Voss's voice rang through the comms. "No retreat, no surrender. We hold the line." The sky burned red as the XL-FAR descended, and the final battle began. The sky burned as XL-FAR warships descended like falling stars, their monstrous forms blotting out the sun. The ground trembled as drop pods crashed into the battlefield, unleashing hordes of alien warriors with razor-sharp limbs and armored hides. The swarm had arrived. Princess Sci-Fi stood among the human soldiers, her twin energy blades humming in her hands. She had fought many battles before, but never one like this. Never against an enemy so vast, so relentless. Captain Darius Voss stood beside her, his rifle raised, his gray eyes locked onto the approaching storm. "This is it," he said, voice calm despite the chaos. "We hold them here, or we don't hold at all." Sci-Fi took a deep breath. "Then let's make sure they remember us." The clash of titans. The first wave of XL-FAR warriors charged forward, their claws tearing through metal and stone. Human soldiers and Varnari warriors fought as one, plasma fire and energy blades cutting down the invaders in flashes of red and blue. Sergeant Malik Oren stood like an unbreakable wall, his massive rotary gun spinning as he ripped through dozens of enemies at once. Lieutenant Rain Calder moved like a ghost, ducking and weaving between the chaos, her sniper rifle dropping enemy commanders with perfect shots. Corbin Jex, the demolitions expert, set off a series of traps, causing entire sections of the battlefield to explode beneath the enemy's feet. But no matter how many fell, more kept coming. Voss barked orders through the comms. "Keep them contained. Push them toward the ridge." Sci-Fi fought with everything she had, her twin blades slicing through the insectoid creatures. But even she felt the weight of the enemy's numbers. They weren't just fighting an army. They were fighting a flood. A desperate gamble. As the battle raged, a terrifying presence emerged. A hive lord, larger than the rest, its exoskeleton black as night, its glowing red eyes filled with malice. It let out a bone-rattling screech, rallying the swarm. The XL-FAR pressed forward with renewed fury. "That's our target," Voss said. "We take it out. The others fall into disarray." Easier said than done. The Hive Lord was surrounded by elite guards, massive creatures with armored bodies and razor-like appendages. They cut down soldiers like wheat before the scythe. Sci-Fi locked eyes with Voss. "I'll draw its attention. You take the shot." He hesitated. "That thing will tear you apart." She smirked. "Then you better not miss." Before he could argue, she launched herself forward, her blades flashing in the air. The Hive Lord turned toward her, its mandibles clicking in amusement. It saw her as nothing more than an insect. It was about to learn otherwise. Sci-Fi moved like lightning, dodging its massive claws, striking at its legs, carving deep into its armor. The Hive Lord roared in anger, swiping at her with a blindingly fast strike. She barely managed to evade, feeling the rush of air as its claw passed inches from her face. Voss took his position, steadying his rifle. One shot. That was all he would get. The Hive Lord reared up for a final, crushing blow. Voss pulled the trigger. The sniper round pierced straight through the creature's skull, its energy core exploding in a blinding flash. For a moment, the battlefield froze. The XL-FAR warriors shuddered, their minds thrown into chaos as their leader fell. Then they broke. The swarm, once an unstoppable force, collapsed into panic, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. Without their leader, they were nothing. Victory and the unknown future. As the surviving XL-FAR fled, Cheers erupted across the battlefield. Saphira, breathing hard, turned to Voss, a rare smile on her lips. Not bad for a human. He chuckled, reloading his rifle. Not bad for an alien princess. She glanced at the retreating enemy. Do you think this is truly over? Voss shook his head. No, but it's a damn good start. As the sun rose over the smoking battlefield, Sci-Fi knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that was a mistake they would never make again.